Met people in communities all around the world. And through that, I thought I knew. I thought I had an awareness to...
The shameless Sussexes have ensured their kids are known as Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet because it is their birthright. Well, Meghan's biographer Tom Bower joins me now.
Harry wasn't supposed to be questioned as a father. He was supposed to be redeemed by it. But Tom Bower just flipped that story upside down. The man known for detonating royal secrets is now saying Archie and Lilibet's origins may not be what we were told. And if Bower is right, the fairy tale collapses in a single breath.
We want our Californian kids to be prince and princess. It's beyond a joke. It's beyond a joke now.
Well, it's king and queen of hypocrisy, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, they are the arch hypocrites.
For years, Prince Harry has leaned on fatherhood as his shield. When critics mocked him as fragile or spoiled, he pointed back to Archie. When the media roasted Meghan for clashing with the palace, he lifted up Lilibet as proof of their new life in California. Fatherhood wasn't just personal, it was the Sussex brand. But Bower's words strike at the one detail they've guarded most fiercely, whether those children are even theirs by blood. And that contradiction, the truth-tellers, accused of concealing the ultimate truth, is why the world can't look away. According to Bower, the inconsistencies were always hiding in plain sight. Meghan's pregnancy announcements didn't quite line up. Baby bumps shifted strangely between appearances. Unlike William and Kate's traditional hospital steps, Harry and Meghan skipped transparency in favor of a staged photo call. Reports suggest that birth records were sealed, curated, or quietly altered. On their own, these quirks could be dismissed. Together, Bower argues, they paint a disturbing picture, one that leads straight to whispers of surrogacy, secrecy, and legitimacy. If he's right, it's not just about family privacy, it's about succession. And that's why this story escalates so fast.
Which he then peddled back on Harry, because he knew it was untrue. It was one of Meghan's many lies. And that is really what's so awful. And that's why Charles tried very hard yesterday to assert the importance of the Commonwealth. He's quite right.
Fans can forgive Hollywood-style photo control, they can forgive Netflix deals and Spotify flops. But when the royal family's centuries-old bloodline is in question, that's different. Suddenly, anonymous online forums became front-page headlines. Commentators on GB News asked bluntly, why won't the Sussexes take a DNA test? Even insiders quoted by the Daily Mail argue that silence only makes things worse. The irony is brutal. The couple who built their rebellion on honesty now look guilty precisely because they won't speak. Harry's personal response, according to reports, has been unraveling. Insiders claim he's pacing Montecito halls, ranting at staff, obsessively scrolling through coverage. The same man once branded as the therapy prince is now mocked online as unable to cope with his own truth. Meghan's response? The opposite. Calculated, cold. Legal threats allegedly drafted against outlets repeating Bower's words. To critics, it looks like strategy. To fans, it looks like concealment. And both interpretations fuel the fire. Because every day the couple stays silent, another day the world asks the same question. If there's nothing to hide, why hide it? And here's where the contradiction burns brightest.
And he should make quite clear that Harry is not welcome. But everything about Charles is so indecisive. He can't even at the moment decide whether he should wear a uniform or not on the coronation or breeches.
Harry and Meghan claimed they fled the palace to escape secrets. But now Tom Bower says their survival depends on keeping the biggest one of all. The contradiction is devastating, and it's only the beginning. When Tom Bower speaks, it doesn't stay in private circles. It detonates across the media. Within hours of his revelation, the whispers once relegated to fringe blogs exploded onto primetime broadcasts and front-page headlines. Suddenly, what had been dismissed as conspiracy talk was treated like a constitutional crisis. And that shift from gossip to legitimacy is where the Sussexes' nightmare truly begins. Fans reacted first. On TikTok, the hashtag number sign "show the proof" surged past 1 million views in a single day. Clips of Meghan's shifting baby bump reappeared, stitched with commentary from creators asking, why did the palace births look so different? Reddit threads titled DNA or Bust rose to the top of royal watching forums. And the memes came fast.
He wants to please everybody, and yet he poses as a confrontationist. And it doesn't work. So he should have, vis-a-vis the Sussexes, cancelled the titles, and he should make absolutely clear that Harry is not welcome.
One viral post showed a side-by-side of William and Kate smiling outside the hospital versus Meghan and Harry's tightly staged photo call captioned transparency versus secrecy. It was cruel but effective, because once the internet reduces a scandal to a meme, it never really disappears. Then came the commentators. Piers Morgan called it the one question Meghan can't sue away. GB News framed it as a constitutional issue, not a private one. Even traditionally cautious outlets like The Times noted the discrepancy between the Sussexes' tightly controlled baby announcements and the openness of past royal births. Each layer of coverage gave the claims more oxygen. And with every headline, the pressure mounted on Harry and Meghan to answer, or risk being defined by their silence. Behind the scenes, insiders claim the couple was split. Sources familiar with Montecito's staff told the Daily Mail that Harry wanted to issue a public denial, to fight fire with fire. Meghan, they said, preferred a legal route, warning that any public statement would only invite louder demands for DNA proof. That divide painted a picture not of a united front, but of a marriage under strain. For critics, it was confirmation of what they'd long suspected. Harry unraveling emotionally, Meghan pulling the strings strategically. And while the Sussexes hesitated, institutions began to weigh in. Royal insiders reportedly told The Telegraph that the palace viewed the scandal as toxic but containable, provided they remained silent. But silence cut both ways. If the palace distanced itself, critics argued, wasn't that tacit acknowledgement the doubts were valid? Parliamentarians even began to whisper about constitutional clarity. As one political commentator put it, if there's doubt about bloodlines, there's doubt about succession. That's not gossip, that's governance.
Tom, it's interesting, isn't it? Because this Commonwealth Day actually was important because of all of the damage that Netflix series did literally a few weeks ago.
The escalation was clear. What began as whispers about a celebrity couple's children had become a question about the monarchy itself. Fans mocked, critics analyzed, institutions hedged, and at the center, Harry and Meghan stayed silent. But silence in a scandal doesn't freeze the narrative, it accelerates it. And with every unanswered day, the question grew louder. Will the Sussexes defend their family or let Tom Bower's claim define them? The deeper you dig into Bower's claims, the darker the puzzle becomes. According to reports, the first red flag wasn't whispered on social media. It was noticed inside palace walls. Insiders say staff were unsettled by how Meghan's pregnancy was handled compared to Kate's. There was no traditional hospital reveal, no carefully managed but public-facing birth records. Instead, the Sussexes insisted on secrecy, vague announcements, limited access, and staged photography. To the public, it looked modern. To insiders, it looked like concealment. Then came the visual inconsistencies. Observers documented Meghan's baby bump shifting in unusual ways. In one photo, the curve looked smaller than in appearances just days before. In another, it seemed unusually pronounced, sparking speculation about prosthetics. Tabloids hinted at it, but always couched their language. Now, Bower drags it into the open. He argues these weren't fashion illusions or tricks of light. They were deliberate manipulations designed to maintain a narrative of pregnancy while hiding an inconvenient truth. And when those images are played side by side, critics insist the timeline simply doesn't add up. Birth records added fuel. Reports suggest irregularities, missing details, withheld documentation, unexplained edits. Journalists familiar with the archives have noted that the transparency standard applied to William and Kate's children wasn't followed with Archie or Lilibet. Where one family offered paperwork and proud hospital moments, the other offered silence. For Bower, these details aren't circumstantial, they're evidence. And when combined with Meghan's meticulously curated photo releases, always on her terms, always selective, the pattern forms something far more troubling than coincidence. But the most explosive revelation goes beyond optics. Bower points toward the constitutional stakes, bloodlines, and legitimacy. If surrogates were used, why hide it? If outside donors were involved, what does that mean for the line of succession? For a monarchy built entirely on blood, these aren't small questions. They cut to the system's foundation. Fans may see it as intrusive gossip, but institutions cannot afford ambiguity. As one legal analyst told Sky News, if there's even the appearance of uncertain lineage, constitutional lawyers will demand clarity. It's unavoidable. The personal cost to Harry is devastating. Insiders quoted by The Sun describe him as fragile, paranoid, even obsessive. He reportedly scours coverage late into the night, snapping at staff, pacing hallways, consumed by the idea that his fatherhood, his very identity, is under attack. For Meghan, the stakes are strategic. Legal threats have been drafted, but critics warn that suing risks dragging evidence into open court. One wrong move could transform whispers into sworn testimony, and that looming risk has left their silence looking less like dignity and more like guilt. At this stage, Bowers' revelations don't simply raise questions, they redefine the Sussex story, from fairy tale escapees building a modern life in California to potential architects of a deception so deep it threatens not just their brand, but the monarchy itself. And if history tells us anything, once legitimacy is questioned, it is never forgotten. By the time Tom Bowers' words settled into the global press cycle, the scandal had reached a point of no return. What began as whispers about Meghan's bump and Harry's fatherhood was now painted as a constitutional storm, threatening the crown itself. And the most dangerous part wasn't what was said, it was what wasn't answered. Every silence from Montecito acted like oxygen to the fire. Fans escalated first. Outside Buckingham Palace, protesters were spotted holding signs reading DNA or done. TikTok creators stitched Harry's speeches on mental health with Bowers' claims, asking how a man preaching honesty could hide the most basic truth. On Twitter, #RoyalDeception trended alongside clips of Meghan speaking about authenticity during the Oprah interview. The contrast was brutal. The couple who accused the Palace of Lies now stood accused of creating the biggest one of all. Industry insiders followed. A former Netflix executive told Variety that the streaming giant was terrified of being tied to a collapsing brand. If Meghan and Harry's family fairy tale turned toxic, billions in content and contracts could be jeopardized. Spotify had already walked away. Could Netflix be next? Book publishers whispered about the risk of associating with a narrative that might implode under DNA questions. For Meghan, whose strategy depended on carefully monetizing the Sussex image, this was the nightmare scenario. Partners doubting not just her projects, but her family's very story. Even the palace, known for silence, began to shift. Royal correspondents reported that courtiers were actively strategizing how to distance the institution if the scandal deepened. One insider quoted in The Telegraph said the Windsor response was, "Don't interfere, but don't embrace." It was a careful dance, protect the crown but leave Harry and Meghan isolated. And for critics, that very distance looked damning. If the palace won't defend the Sussex children, does that mean the whispers have weight? The cultural fallout spread beyond Britain. American commentators drew comparisons to past celebrity scandals. Some likened Meghan to Elizabeth Holmes, building an empire on a narrative now under forensic scrutiny. Others compared Harry to Britney Spears in his most fragile days, a man collapsing under the weight of his own contradictions. The Sussexes, once the glamorous alternative to the monarchy, now risked becoming global cautionary tales. And here's where the peak tension lands: Meghan's control versus Harry's unraveling. Reports suggest Harry begged to issue a public denial to reclaim his fatherhood. Meghan, described as cold and calculating, allegedly shut it down. That image, a broken prince silenced by a strategic wife, became tabloid dynamite. For critics, it confirmed their darkest narrative: Harry as a puppet, Meghan as the puppeteer. And whether fair or not, scandals rarely reward nuance. The Sussexes had built their empire on a fairy tale. But at the peak of this drama, that fairy tale looked less like freedom and more like fabrication. And the question no longer belonged to fans or tabloids, it belonged to history. The aftermath of Tom Bowers' revelation isn't just about headlines, it's about legacy. For Harry, the fallout cuts into the very core of his identity. His redemption arc was built on fatherhood. Every time he stumbled, every time Meghan was criticized, Harry pointed back to Archie and Lilibet as proof that his life had meaning beyond the monarchy. Now, critics argue, that shield has shattered. Reports claim Harry has become increasingly paranoid, locked in cycles of self-doubt, and haunted by the cruel irony of being questioned as a parent after branding himself the therapy prince. To the public, he looks less like Diana's brave son and more like a man consumed by secrets. For Meghan, the fallout looks different. She is portrayed less as broken and more as calculating. Insiders say legal teams are drafting threats against any outlet repeating Bowers' words. But here's the paradox. The moment she sues, the door to evidence swings open. DNA tests, court filings, witness testimony, all the things she has fought to keep under wraps could be forced into daylight. Silence, meanwhile, only fuels suspicion. Meghan's carefully crafted image as a truth teller against the palace is now being dismantled by her own refusal to reveal the truth. For a woman who once demanded transparency from the monarchy, critics say she now looks like the architect of the deepest deception. The monarchy itself hasn't escaped unscathed. By refusing to publicly support Harry and Meghan's children, the palace feeds speculation. Analysts argue that this distance is intentional, a way to protect the crown from being tied too closely to heirs who might one day be challenged. If true, it reveals a chilling calculation, that the institution would rather sacrifice Harry's family than risk its legitimacy. And that raises the final devastating question: will Archie and Lilibet be remembered as royal heirs or as symbols of scandal? In the end, Tom Bower's revelation didn't just ignite gossip, it tore open the single story Harry and Meghan could not afford to lose: the story of their family. Without that fairy tale, their empire of Netflix deals, book advances, and speaking tours looks fragile. Without that fairy tale, they risk being remembered not as freedom fighters against the palace, but as celebrities who built an illusion and couldn't hold it together. And that, more than anything, may be their undoing, because scandals fade, but questions of bloodline never disappear. And that leaves us with one final irony. Harry and Meghan fled the palace to escape secrecy. Yet now, it's secrecy that may destroy them. If Tom Bower can shake the monarchy with just one allegation, imagine what happens if the proof ever surfaces. Subscribe now, because the day the truth breaks won't just be a headline, it'll be history.